Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lorca Live. To open this morning, please welcome Andrew Rohan and Lydia Ragunanan.
I'm your master of ceremonies for the day, so you're going to see quite a lot of me throughout the day. When you recognise me, there's either coffee, sugar, or a very interesting speaker coming. I just want to reflect on why we're here and how we've got here. So in 2011, a colleague of mine, Gavin Poole, who's CEO of Here East, and I sat in a room with a whiteboard, and we looked at a vision which was an incredible one. We looked at converting some of the buildings that were used for the delivery of the Olympic Games, particularly the media delivery, so the broadcast and press. And we looked at converting them into an asset for the UK that was going to be able to drive legacy outcomes. When I say legacy outcomes, I mean massive social regeneration, huge employment opportunities, and economic redevelopment that would last for 40 years and beyond within the UK. And I'm so delighted to say that I think we're now past the tipping point of success. So we have a campus here called Here East that has 1.2 million square foot worth of capacity. We have over 20 large enterprises, we have 2 universities, and within Plexal we have 142 individual startup and scale-up businesses. Here East is intending on bringing together those groups, the academics, the enterprises, and the innovators, to collaborate to cause change. And we're so proud to be able to do that today on behalf of the UK government. Plexal. So we have an innovation centre here that you've been enjoying so far. We do 2 things. So we are the co-working space that delivers this vibrant community for all of those businesses. And what we're trying to achieve here is to bring together industry and the scale-up businesses in order to further both of their goals. We also have a consulting business, an innovation consulting business, that's focused on 3 things. Cybersecurity, which is obviously why we're all here today, mobility, and social inclusion. We are the custodians of London's 2012 Olympic legacy, and we're incredibly proud to be so. I'd just like to hand over to Lydia.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I'm part of the team that is delivering Lorca. So the theme and the focus of today. And Lorca is a £13.5 million government-backed program to help scale the most promising cybersecurity companies in the UK, some of the companies of which you would have met earlier today in the Innovation Hub, and if you haven't yet, please make sure that you do so. So we're part of the wider government strategy to help keep the UK the safest place to be online. And in addition to Plexal, we are partnering with Deloitte and Queen's University Belfast to deliver Lorca. Over the next 3 years, we'll support 72 scaling companies, and we hope to bring them in £40 million of investment and really through them grow 2,000 jobs and more. But Plexal and Lorca has become really the catalyst for something much wider. What we really want to be is a world-leading cybersecurity hub and a cluster for cybersecurity innovation. And as all of you today represent the different industries, ideas and insights we need to make that happen. We need academia and really early stage thought leadership and research. We need government backing and to bring in new ideas, to bring in investment and to bring in stimulation. We need innovators and their ideas who can take early stage research and develop them into something new. We need large enterprises who both are interested in commercialising research but also working with the innovators to address solutions that they can't have, that they can't quite find at the moment. And we also need end users and we need investors. And I think in our audience today we have a selection of that. So this is really the start and furthering on the process and helping to become a world-class leading innovation hub for cybersecurity. So on that basis and on that idea that we need collaboration and stimulation of ideas, please use today as a forum to be curious, to ask questions, to challenge things, and to engage. So hopefully you'll get a sense of Lorca today, a sense of what we're about, and I'll pass back over now to Andrew to go through some housekeeping.
Thank you, Lydia. So some of the boring stuff. So we do not plan on having a fire test or fire drill. In the event you do hear the fire alarm, there are 2 exits. So one just at the back there, you go down some steps and out onto the canal side area. And then the second just to the left, or my left, your right as you look at it. There are fire marshals on site, so you'll be led to those destinations. We have an app. So many of us have sweated long and hard to create this, so we'd love it if you could download it. You'll have received an email from events@plexal.com, which has a code in order for you to get into it. But please do download it. It will give you lots of functionality throughout the day, show you some detail about the speakers, talk to you about the agenda, give you the opportunity to ask questions via it, and I'll be prompting you throughout the day to trigger some of those questions to the panels and the speakers that we've got. We have Wi-Fi. With the relevant SSID here and the password, so feel free to use it. We have a Twitter feed, so hashtag #LorcaLive, if you wouldn't mind using it, so post pictures and content throughout the day would be wonderful. And then if you would be so kind as to turn your phones to silent while the speakers are up here, just to avoid any unnecessary distractions. So, thank you to all of my team for the support you've given us all to get to this very proud moment for us, and I'd really like to start the day. So, in a week where we've celebrated the 30-year anniversary of the internet, but we've also seen a major access failure to some of the largest websites and applications across the world, I think it's quite apt that today's theme is about trust. So, I'm delighted to announce the first of our speakers, which is a gentleman called Paul Taylor, who represents an organisation called the Centre for Research and Evidence on Security Threats. And he's going to give us a 10-minute chat now and then lead us into the day. So I look forward to welcoming you all later and meeting with you. Thank you.
Good morning. Everybody's clearly excited, that's great. As somebody who directs a national centre whose goal is to understand how behaviour affects security, I'm quite giddy that we're going to have an entire day focused on something as human as trust. And you might expect that I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes lamenting you about why human is important in the equation, but I think that horse has already bolted. In the same way that thought leaders in high-risk industries have realised that the way to reach their holy grail of 0 accidents is not through technology alone, I suspect all of you realise that the way to innovate in cyber is not going to be through technology alone, but through a blend of human and technology excellence. But quite how to do that, how to achieve it, how to model it, how to build that into your developmental process might be a challenge that you're still grappling with. So I thought I'd share with you, from my experiences, 3 things to look out for during today. The first is that really thinking deeply about trust can bring some sophistication to what we do. Psychologists have long known that trust that you have in a person or a thing is not a single entity. The extent to which you trust a platform depends on how you perceive its competence, how you perceive its integrity, and how you perceive its kindness or its benevolence. So I may trust a social media platform's ability to make my data secure, but I may have less trust in its integrity about telling me how it's going to use the data. Conversely, I may trust the benevolence of an SME to be desperately keen to do everything it can for my privacy, but I may not trust its ability to protect me against national and international threats. Those are very different trust problems which require different trust solutions. And those of you that have been interested in information privacy over the last 5 years will have noticed a shift in the dialogue about how we think about these systems as trustworthy. 5 years ago, trust was around ensuring we had high-grade encryption and two-factor authentication, those types of things. The trust messages were those focused on competence and ability. Today's trust messages are around integrity and benevolence. We are not going to use your data for any purpose that you don't know about. There's been a shift in the trust landscape. So thinking sophisticatedly about how trust engages your own product allows you to be more sophisticated. It also allows you to be more robust. Professor Rosalind Searle from the University of Glasgow is interested in organisational change and how when you change an organisation, you shift the trust dynamics between the managers and the employers, and how that can sometimes lead to negative consequences, including insider threat. And so what she's done is draw on social science to develop a set of quite usable tools for managers and leaders to understand the trust pinch points, the areas in which an organisation will suffer during the change in terms of trust, and how somebody can deal with that. That's an issue of sophistication, but what really comes out of Rosalind's work is what happens when you start applying this to different communities, both nationally and globally. Because what works in one organisation doesn't work in another organisation. What works in one part of the world, what seems to be a fantastic innovation in one part of the world, just doesn't translate elsewhere. And the issue there is not the technological innovation, it's the fact that the human dynamics behind it mean that the persons or organisation are not engaging with the system in the same way. So Rosalind's work allows companies to think about these issues beforehand so that they can deal with it rather than having to retrospectively try and make things fit. The third issue that I think you'll see a lot of today is how trustworthiness allows you to be more efficient. I do a lot of work on insider threat detection, and one of the areas there is around finding abnormalities in people's work patterns that will allow you to flag them up as a potential concern. People come up with tools that have hundreds of different indicators that you can look at. But to me, that's rather like having a soldier who's wanting to target one deer in the field and firing 1,000 bullets, knowing that one of them is probably going to hit your target. The problem with that is there's a lot of collateral damage. Interestingly, there's another way of detecting insiders, which is social security, people actually recognizing the problem. But what if we could find a technological way of measuring that social dynamic? It turns out you can, and that way is around measuring the interactions and the trust that people are showing each other in their day-to-day emails, their day-to-day communications. That one measure, which is behaviourally inspired, turns out to be just as effective, just as predictive as the 100 measures that others have developed. In other words, by thinking very carefully and deeply about how humans are going to engage with your platform, you can begin to refine and make more efficient your innovation. So, sophistication, robustness, and efficiency. I want to end with a story I heard only 3 weeks ago, but I like it and I think it's relevant to today. And it's a story, a historic story about the car manufacturing organization. In the US, when they were developing cars, towards the end of the manufacturing process, they would pull out a big rubber mallet. And the reason for that was to knock the door into alignment so that it closed smoothly. They had their Japanese partners coming over, and they were showing them the factory, and they got to this last stage. And they said, so what kind of rubber mallet do you use? And the Japanese representatives looked rather embarrassed and hesitated for a moment and said, I'm really sorry, we don't use a mallet. We design our doors to fit. As you are accelerating your new innovations, thinking about trust now, thinking about the human aspects of your delivery now will mean that your door fits. And if nothing else, it means that you don't have to spend a lot of money on expensive mallets. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. So, one of the great things about Lorca is our ability to convene. And we convene both industries, scale-ups, governments, charities, regulators, and many more. One of the most impressive forums that we run is called the Industry Advisory Board, which is a genuine collection of world leaders in cybersecurity, real thought leaders, and many of them are here today, and we thank you all for your participation. That group is helping us to create something special out of Lorca. We intend to have a huge impact on the UK national security, job creation, investment values, and the quality and success of our scale-up businesses. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Robert Hannigan, who's the chair of this Industry Advisory Board and the real spirit behind that drive.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and great to be here. Good morning, everybody. Lydia and Andrew asked me to say something about sort of the government perspective on cybersecurity and trust, and to tie up a bit of today, expanding on what Paul's just illustrated from the human perspective. And I guess I wanted to say something about that and what we might do about it, what governments are worrying about doing about it. You don't need me to say that trust is at an all-time low. Every barometer, every survey shows that. Trust within countries, trust of government, of industry, trust between countries, trust between trading blocs. And it's making it very hard to get agreement on anything, as you can see, from climate change to arms control to just about anything you want to mention. But what interests me is that I think the political classes and the public debate has suddenly woken up to something which will be completely obvious to everybody in this room. Because that trust is now bleeding into the technology space. So people have woken up to this idea that the whole economy, the global economy, the country economy, every company and every individual is sitting on an IT infrastructure and an internet that is fundamentally insecure or has some insecurities built into it. And is reliant on a supply chain which is getting ever more difficult even to understand, never mind to trust or secure. So a lot of the panic that you're seeing, I think, in recent months is around a realization of that. And it's partly, of course, driven by massive data breaches, by major cyber attacks, and by other less malign outages. But it is leading to a complete change in the thinking, I think, in governments about trust. But for those in this room, I think, and anybody in the industry, cybersecurity has always been about trust. Essentially, all cyber attacks are an abuse of trust, I think, either by persuading a person to trust something they shouldn't, obviously email, still the classic vector for delivering malware, or getting a machine to trust a machine when it shouldn't, through exploiting vulnerabilities, through 0 days, through certificate-based attacks, through all the things you know about. So it's getting one or the other to misplace its trust. And all cybercrime, which is what most of us experience and most companies experience in cyber attacks, are about an abuse of trust. That's what fraud is. So it's not a revelation to anybody here. And those old problems that we've been worrying about, and many of the companies brought through by Lorca are doing brilliant things on, like identity, the holy grail of authentication and how do we do it, are still there 10, 15 years on, and we're still looking at really innovative ways of doing that. So there's a lot of old stuff coming along. But I think what is changing is that the stakes are rising all the time. So the reason why I think everybody's got very excited about 5G, and there's a lot of debate about this at the moment, is not because the technology is so fundamentally different. I mean, it is different from 3 and 4G, but it's that the dependencies, the critical dependencies, are much greater than ever before. So it really matters. I mean, we're going to have a session on autonomous vehicles later. Clearly, latency matters when you're traveling at 80 miles an hour, and a few microseconds do matter in a way that most of the things dependent on 3 and 4G don't. And I think as well as the availability of data and the confidentiality and integrity of it, things like healthcare that will be transformed by 5G and AI, and we have sessions on AI later as well, are utterly dependent on getting the trust thing right. So people will not use those services or allow them to be used, and we will not get the benefits from them if they don't trust exactly the kinds of things that Paul was just describing. So the stakes suddenly got higher, which is why governments are really worrying about it. And the positive side of that is they want, as Paul says, to build in trust early and to build in security early. So what do we do about this? Well, 3 things, I guess. One is we need to understand better the risks. The truth is, it's really hard if you go to a company and ask them, do you understand your supply chain? Particularly very large companies. It's a really difficult challenge. I deal a lot with big US companies who may be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on their cybersecurity and are doing a really good job, but are realizing and have realized over the last few years that they have thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of vendors, and they don't really understand the risk that comes from that and the vulnerabilities that they're exposed to. And even trying to assess that even at the vendor level, never mind at the software and hardware level, is really, really tough. And it's also tough for governments. And we've seen some examples around the world where governments have accidentally procured things which they later discovered were not made where they thought they were or by the people they thought they were made by. So it's really difficult to understand. So the first thing is, I think, helping to understand those interdependencies, which are more complex and deeper than ever before. The second thing, of course, is to retrofit security onto this infrastructure that is fundamentally not designed with security in mind. And essentially, what the cyber industry and many of the companies here have been doing over the last 10, 15 years is exactly that, trying to get really clever solutions to retrofit security and to make it better. And there are lots of examples of that, and you don't need me to outline them. But I think, an obvious one, of course, is the Trusted Platform Module. So TPM is a great example, I think, of industry getting together and just doing this. It hasn't solved every problem, but it's a world away from where we were 20 years ago. So it can be done. The third thing we need to do, though, and this is really the holy grail, and every government is worrying about this, is build in security by design and default for the future. I think it's Paul's point about building in trust when you design something. It's absolutely critical that we get that right. And every government is looking at regulation on this. The EU is looking at regulation on this. Most of the major US states are either drafting regulation or have already, in California's case, published it. So everybody, as the attack surface expands through IoT, and we'll be talking about that later today, as the data that flows rises exponentially out of all those devices, and we have ever more ingenious ways of using it through AI and machine learning. This just got that much more difficult, so we need to make sure that in AI, we have a session on that later, that we build in trust, we build into those algorithms an integrity and an ability for the public to actually use them with confidence and with trust. So it's understanding the problem and the risks, it's retrofitting where we have to, and frankly, we're going to have to do that, and then it's building for the future by design and by default, so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. We don't wake up in 10 years' time with a massive flow of data, a massively expanded attack surface, everything done through cloud, and realize we haven't really built in the security we should have done. We absolutely don't want to be there, and governments that's the #1 priority, I think, for them, is to make sure we don't get there. And it can only be done, actually, on an international basis. Though there are some great experiments going on, as you know here. The simple things like trying to make, this is retrofitting, but trying to make email trusted again, so through DMARC, and the NCSC, National Cybersecurity Center, experiments on that have been really interesting. If you look at the metrics for success, really successful. So there are possibilities for putting some things right, and there are real possibilities for building in security by design. So I'm a kind of an optimist where trust in the future is concerned. And just to sum up, I think I've never regarded security or cybersecurity as an end in itself. And I think the exciting thing about being involved in this industry is you're enabling great things for the future. The only reason why any of us actually want to get involved in this is to enable great technologies. Healthcare being the most obvious example, and you'll see in the session later, but I think the possibilities offered by new uses of data and new access to healthcare are just fantastic. They are fantastic for effective treatment of individuals and better lives. They're also very attractive for governments because they solve that enormous cost problem on healthcare that is at the moment escalating out of control. So it's absolutely critical we get it right. We won't get it right unless people trust it, and we won't get the trust right unless we get that combination of technology and human behavior right that Paul talked about. So I think that's the challenge for us. That's the opportunity too. I mean, it is a fantastic opportunity for the companies in this room and the cohorts that have gone through and are now going through Lorca and other parts of the country. It is a really exciting thing to be involved in because you're enabling a new future based on an appropriate level of security and trust and an appropriate level of risk. So the politics may be depressing at the moment in any part of the world, but I don't think we should let that hold us back. We can, at an industry level, get on with a lot of this stuff. And it is happening. It's happening here, and it's great to see. So I think you'll see during today's session some really interesting and innovative ideas, as well as some really interesting debates about how we build that trust in. And it is the key to the future. So congratulations to Lorca, and I hope you have a great day.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. So I mentioned earlier on, Plexal has an innovation consulting offer that considers cybersecurity, mobility, and social inclusion. Now, within mobility, when we do our best work, we bring together various groups across industry borders, and we consider and cause the change that wouldn't happen within an individual sector. An example of that, so lots of the mobile operators are considering the ubiquitous rollout of the 5G infrastructure in the UK. But there's a real challenge there around where the industry use case starts to emerge and where the economics start to make sense for those mobile operators to invest. So we're working across multiple sectors in order to cause the emergence of that use case. Likewise, with the events at Heathrow and Gatwick, just pre and post Christmas, we've seen a real emergence for drone detection technology. And using the Olympic Park as a potential test bed for that activity is another program of work that we're considering. Now, I'm particularly focused here on the overlap between mobility and cybersecurity, which is why I'm delighted to introduce the next panel. So we're going to be talking about autonomous vehicles and the risk of weaponization. So to introduce that panel and the chair of that panel, I'd like to welcome Ronnie Zahavi to the stage. So Ronnie is certainly preeminent in this sector. He's the CEO of Cyberspark, which is the world-leading example of a successful cybersecurity ecosystem built in Israel. So welcome, Ronnie.
Okay. This is the biggest challenge of the day, naturally, to operate the clicker. So thank you very much, Lorca, for inviting me and being part of the magnificent and wonderful work that is being done here. Our panel is aimed to address a triangle, trying to bring together trust, automotive industry or smart mobility, and cybersecurity. And of each and every one of those, we can speak for a week. So the biggest challenge is how to do all this in 40 minutes and try to comprehend together and bring together all the aspects. I want to start by saying in 2 minutes to talk about cyber and trust and to look at it from a different perspective. If you think about modern society, since the first industrial revolution, there was a sort of an unwritten agreement between the information owners and the information beneficiaries. And the idea was that me as an information owner, being a doctor, being a pilot, being anything you can think about, I'm committed to professionalism. So I'm committed to do the best I can to be professional, to know, to search, to research, to learn, to get developed, and to provide the beneficiaries with the best service I can provide. That's one side of the equation. On the other equation is society. Now, society, in return, brings trust to the equation. So I say, okay, when I buy a bottle of milk in the supermarket and there is an expiration date on that, I trust that the whole ecosystem that is behind the manufacturing of this milk is professional, is serious, they've done everything they need to do, so I can trust this date. And if you think about it as us, part of modern society, we put our trust in things that are beyond reason, right? We go on an airplane with our families, we cruise on 30,000 foot in the middle of the night, and we're happy. We go to the operation room in hospital, and we are happy with somebody looking at our body and open our body. And that's because we have this equation. So what has changed? What has changed in this equation is that through the development of IT, and especially the information sharing and the cloud, we opened gateways to people who are not committed to this unwritten agreement to play part in the game. So they can actually manipulate the information that we trusted until now. And they are not committed to that code that ethical and moral code that human society used to exercise. So suddenly they can change the date. And suddenly it's wrong. And we are going to be poisoned because the milk we are buying is beyond expiration date. Not to mention other industries and healthcare and anything else. So this is one of the things worthwhile thinking about in terms of what do we need to do in order to maintain the trust, because this is the very foundation of our society. Now, what we are going to do here in this panel is focus on the automotive industry, and I would like just to set the scene by talking about a couple of the terminology we use, and before I invite my colleagues to the panel to make sure that we all speak the same language. So why do I trust with this? Maybe because I've been engaged with aviation for 23 years of my life, but this is just an artist's visualization of an airplane of the 2040 or 2045. It's an electrical airplane, but what is very interesting, it has a cockpit. So when you talk about airplanes, even if you think about airplanes that are due to fly within, I don't know, 20, 30 years from now, there are going to be pilots in there. And you ask yourself, how many of you would be happy to take your family and fly on an unmanned airplane, knowing there's no crew there? Same thing with the ship. This is one of the most innovative ship, which is called the Eco Ship, and there is a bridge. So when you look at the car, the first thing you notice when you come to talk about autonomous vehicle, there's no driver. So how is it possible? What's the difference? Why are we happy to think about a car with no driver, but we cannot even think about an airplane where there's no captain at the front side? So I would like just to straight a couple of the terminology that we're going to use. One of them is that there is a confusion between autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles. So we are very much enthusiastic by the idea of autonomous vehicles, but I don't really think that we're going to see full autonomous vehicles in 10 or 15 or 20 years. But until then, we already exercise, all of us, connected vehicles. And the cyber risk for connected vehicles is quite high. So just for you to know, there are 5 or 6, depends if you count the 0, levels of autonomy. So this is number 1. All of us has it. Okay? We have cruise control. We have something that assists us in driving. Then there is level 2. Level 2 is one or more things coming together. So for example, you preserve the lane and you have a cruise control or something that can control your brakes. Not all of us have this. Level 3 is the driver is still required, but the vehicle can perform all aspects of driving. We don't see those yet, but we expect to see them within few years. They are not far away from us. When we come to talk about level 4 and thereafter level 5, the only difference is partial automation and full automation. This is going to take some time. But still, there are a couple of things that are worth mentioning with respect of automotive industry. So this is a chart that reflects the penetration pace of connected cars. So nearly all the cars are going to be connected in a very, very short period of time. Once we say connected cars, we go back to where I started my presentation, and we welcome in people that are not committed to what we talked about. So the question is, how come this is such a big issue that everybody is talking about, and still you don't feel the panicking? Okay, so if you look at the chart, which is very interesting, you can identify the exponential tendency of the line, but if you look at the actual numbers, they're not that high. So if you compare them, for example, with cyber attacks in IoT, cyber attacks in banks, cyber attacks in organizations, where you talk about thousands over thousands per day, here we talk about 58 attacks for connected vehicles in 2018. The numbers are still small. Nothing major has happened yet. Once it's happened, I think the game is going to change, but nothing has happened yet. So yes, we talk about it. We realize it's going to be a big issue, but you still don't find all the OEMs are getting really hectic about it. The other thing which is interesting is what exactly, if we look at those hacking attacks, what exactly were they hacking? So most of them were hacking the servers in the back end of the company. Some of them, something like 80%, were trying to hack the keys, simply to steal the car. or to steal whatever is in the car. And if we talk about connected cars, there are a couple of things I would like to leave you with before I end my presentation as a material to think about. So question number one, if money was not an issue, would you buy a self-driving car? May I ask you to raise your hand? How many of you would buy a self-driving car? That's about third, between quarter to third. Very interesting. So let's go to question number two. Question number two is, do you believe connected car devices help you drive safer? What do you think? Now we are talking. And still, there are a couple of people that don't think that they help you drive safer. Very interesting why. So we will try to address those questions as we run the panel. And this is the last thing I would like to end my presentation with, and this is a quote by Dan Ammon, the president of GM, who says that in today's connected vehicles, safety and security are one and the same. And this is very true. So I would like to take the opportunity and invite my colleagues to the panel. Please welcome Baras from DG Cities, Professor Kasten from Cyber System, Alex from Razo Secure, and Gavin Cole. Great. So we're privileged with having people that cover large aspect and whole spectrum of what we were talking about. And I would like to ask each and every one of you about 5 minutes to present yourself and what are the things that you are doing. Why don't we start with you?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Balázs Csivar. I work at a company called DG Cities. We are essentially the smart city company of the Royal Borough of Greenwich in London. And that position kind of enables us to work with industry, to work with different public sector companies as well, and really look at smart cities and really look at how innovation is affecting smart cities. Some of the projects that we have been involved in have been focusing on connected and autonomous vehicles. We started with projects like Gateway, which put autonomous pods on the Greenwich Peninsula going around the O2. Since then, currently we are building an autonomous vehicle testbed, an urban testbed, to test connected and autonomous vehicles. And we are also looking to kind of start testing commercial models of autonomous vehicle services from next year. But why do we do all this? And why do we think that kind of being part of a city, kind of a city authority or local authority should be involved in these questions? And I think kind of as the theme of this event as well is kind of goes back to trust, and it goes back to kind of our need to be able to ensure that people in our communities are safe. So if you look at transportation, if you look at vehicles, kind of what do we do today? People are aware that when they go on a street, they need to look around, they look at traffic lights, they look at the signs, and they know that people around them, people driving or other people walking around, know these rules. With cybersecurity, many of these rules are a bit more covered. People are not really aware of what actually is safe, what actually is secure, what their role in the problem is, what they can do to kind of mitigate it. And I think that's something which is kind of very important to understand, because when kind of vehicles have been getting safe over the last century, where we introduced airbags, we introduced any of the devices which are currently being used to make vehicles safer, people always understood that, okay, we are doing this because this will protect my head from kind of being crashed when a car is in a crash, which is something people understand. With cybersecurity and kind of making cybersecurity kind of a very important element of autonomous vehicles, people often don't understand this because it's something that they think, oh, technology people will solve it, or I don't really understand because it's in the cloud or it's online, or it's not really clear. And we think that for kind of this whole sector to really be able to help our lives and really be able to kind of make an impact, make a difference, we need to have these discussions, and we need to kind of let people understand what the potential problems are, and what the potential risk will be in 5, 10, 15 years when they are sitting in autonomous cars or when they are walking around the roads, and they will understand that there is a potential that something will happen or something might happen. So our work is kind of trying to help the discussion, and this is why we are here today, to talk to all of you, and this is why we are involved in kind of all these innovative consortium projects to kind of try and bring people together and in a way move towards kind of helping people understand what the world will look like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Basas. Professor Kassen, please.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here and recognize so many faces, and it's a great lineup that they've got. For those that you don't know, I'm the Director for Research in Cybersecurity in a department at the University of Warwick. The department's called WMG. It's one of the largest departments in any university in the country. And at Warwick, I'm the principal investigator of one of 17 GCHQ certified academic centres of excellence in cybersecurity research. So I'm very proud to be leading that research centre because it is very multidisciplinary. It's great to see Paul here, and I've done some reviewing for Crest, and they do some fantastic work in bringing different people together, and we certainly have that at Warwick. Myself, I lead a number of projects that you may have heard of in terms of the cybersecurity aspect. That includes the Cybersecurity in the UK site project, which brought together many partners and involved a 41-mile connected corridor around Coventry with urban and interurban infrastructure and roads. I lead the Cybersecurity on the Capri project, which got about 20 partners, and we're working with the London Olympic Legacy Corporation, which is having a pod, a level 5 autonomous pod, running around the Olympic Park in the future. So some challenges around there, around the cyber-physical aspects. But I also work on some more fundamental research, so projects like cloud-assisted real-time methods for autonomy is funded by Jaguar Land Rover and the Research Council in the UK. And one of the largest projects that's just been renewed is a project called PETRAS. It's the UK research hub for cybersecurity of the Internet of Things, and I'm pleased to lead the transport and mobility effort there, working with other colleagues at Edinburgh, Imperial, and Surrey most notably. So I was looking at this this panel title, and I was really pleased it talked about trust, because very often, you know, I'm a director of cybersecurity research, and my title is up there, which is Cyber Systems Engineering, because it's a bit more, security tends to make people think very negatively, and it's quite restrictive. Trust is slightly different, in my opinion, because it engenders a whole plethora of different ideas. So safety is really important, because if we trust something, it's got to be safe for us, it's got to be secure. It should be privacy preserving. Yeah, there's people's data. We know people are concerned about privacy. We did some threat modeling for UK site, and privacy was a key area of citizen data. And we know how people have reacted to things like the Facebook and Cambridge Analytica issue. Trust in the AI that's running them, and there'll be a session next on AI, and Mark will speak, I'm sure, about things like ethical and explainable AI. But one of the things I want to pick up on is that aspect of privacy. And if we look at an industry, this is a really important area so that we can make the system safe. So I'm pleased to sit on the Meridian Strategic Advisory Board, and we have people from different vehicle manufacturers. And the thing is, if one vehicle manufacturer goes out and does some autonomous vehicle testing and gets a near miss, so there's a near big issue, and then it does not share the data with another vehicle manufacturer, and that vehicle manufacturer has a fatality that's arisen, how do we feel as society about that? How do the companies feel? So we've got this issue about people generating lots of data and not wanting to share it because of commercial reasons, but understanding that data needs to be used for a social good. So we need privacy-enhancing technologies. We need support to help share that information to make sure we are protected appropriately. So we're looking at some of that work at WMG. We're also looking at trusted communications. So We recently had a demonstration of communications between the onboard units in vehicles and the roadside infrastructure. We've done some work on analyzing how signals can be jammed and whether they can be detected, because, as you mentioned, connected and autonomous, they're different, and we're moving much closer to collaborative systems. That's where we want to be, where vehicles collaborate, not just that they're connected and getting information in and sending out, but there's collaborative, cooperative processes between them. I think where we are now is we're just a small way into making connected autonomous vehicle systems trustworthy, and we have an issue about legacy systems. So you mentioned how many cars are connected and not connected. That's about new cars made, I think, rather than cars on the roads. Because if you look at those figures, there's going to be a lot of cars that are not connected or autonomous on the roads for quite a long time, and that will be a challenge. So I think to move forward, what we need to do is we need to social, technical combination, so bringing together the socio and the technical solutions and work together between government, industry, and academia to solve some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex?
So my name's Alex Cowan. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Razor Secure. We fundamentally provide intrusion and anomaly detection software for systems that live at the edge. We're part of the Lorca cohort 2. We were also part of the GCHQ accelerator as well. So just a brief introduction to what I mean by systems at the edge. So for us, that means connected and autonomous vehicles. It means connected transport. So we do a lot of work in rail and in aviation. And really, for us, we're all about providing systems that can improve the availability, the security, and the safety of vehicles that are out there in the real world. So to give you an example, actually, that's happening today of a loss of trust that leads to a loss of availability in connected transport is the Boeing 737 MAXes. So they've had a loss of trust in those planes because of the crashes, the 3 crashes that have happened in the last 6 months. So that's caused Boeing to ground all of those planes today. But think about how that looks in autonomous and connected vehicles. Are we going to be in a situation where we have every GM car or every Honda or every Hyundai parked at the side of the road? And that has a much bigger impact for these organizations. So even though you only have, say, 58 attacks against vehicles in the last year, they can be much bigger impact than they can be on other types of systems. So what we do as a company is we work with the providers of these systems, their suppliers, the manufacturers, the OEMs. We integrate our software directly with the systems that we're protecting. And what our software fundamentally does is it learns what is normal for the systems that we're protecting. So we use machine learning to do that. And we do 2 different types of learning. We call it deterministic learning, which is essentially a really smart whitelist of what this system does and how it changes over time, but also probabilistic learning as well. So building recurrent neural networks to build a baseline of normal. And essentially what this does is it allows us to create trust in vehicles that delivers availability into the future as well. So what does that look like today and how does that change? Well, today, that's a penetration test. So a penetration test you typically do on a single vehicle, and it maybe takes 2 to 4 days, possibly longer. But that is a single point of time test that's done on a vehicle. You're reliant on the quality of the penetration tester, and you don't necessarily have the best opportunity to detect the attacks. And new attacks are found over time. So as we move more into connected vehicles, connected transport, rail, aviation, connected cars, what we need to look to do is move more towards continuous monitoring, continuous detection of attacks, continuous detection of anomalies. And that allows us to create trust in vehicles, not only with a single vehicle, but with a whole fleet of vehicles over time. So today we do work, we do a lot of work in rail. We work with Siemens on their digital train platform, as well as 2 other major train manufacturers. We also work with the leaders in providing connectivity to rail systems. And we're starting to do a lot more work in automotive infrastructure because at least our feeling is, particularly when we look at autonomous vehicles, it's actually the infrastructure around the autonomous vehicles that will come first. So take traffic lights as an example. A loss of availability in a traffic light So just before Christmas in Birmingham, single traffic light and a combination of events caused 5 hours of gridlock in Birmingham. So that's a single traffic light. So that's the impact that this can have in the real world. As I mentioned, we are part of Lorca. So if you're interested in having a discussion, we are in their innovation zone. So feel free to come and have a chat to us on our stand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Gavin, please.
So Gavin Paul, as Andrew said right at the beginning, we started this project back in 2011 called iCity, as it was now here east. And we've been working for the last 7 years or so to take it to what we are now, with just under 4,000 people and over 70% of our space let. We've focused quite a lot on mobility, sat within the universities, within Plexal and within the core of here east as well, because we saw it as one of the major challenges facing society and also mainly our urban environments in the coming years. And we detected a step change with electrification, but also with reducing of congestion through the advent of a more autonomous, fully or partial autonomous system. My background is not in mobility, I suppose. I am an aerospace engineer, and my background is certainly not one of cyber, although we take a very clear and active interest in what is going on in that space. But in between my 20-plus military career in the military and starting this project, I was involved in politics, running social policy units and social policy think tanks. So my interest comes in it from more of a social aspect, which is where the trust element comes in, which is let's look at what is society going to do to accept this type of technology of which safety and security, as we've already heard, sit very closely together, almost hand in hand. It's interesting seeing one slide with an aircraft of the future still with a cockpit. You know, we were doing this way back when I was at university looking at the future of aircraft, and we defined the fact you don't need pilots. I see Ben in the audience as well, in both military careers. You know, life would be so much easier without pilots in the military, I can assure you. But we still do need them, particularly in our own airlines, mainly to give confidence to the passengers, but also because now they're systems operators as opposed to just pure pilots. So what does this mean for us in the future about trust? What does it mean about the system which is going to sit over all types of mobility, be it vehicle or other, in mass transit or personal? What does it mean about the systems which sit within those types of vehicles which are going to take us and our family members from A to B? And is it the way that we interact with the infrastructure which guides our vehicles through, or the way that we interact with vehicle to vehicle? And who's got ownership of that? It's okay to say, oh, AI will sort it out. It's a wonderful, smart algorithm. But who's got control of that? Who owns that? Who knows where I'm going? Who knows where my children are going? Who knows exactly what's going to happen to, if they really wanted to be scarless, stop people getting to major nodes of advice and support like hospitals or care homes of the future? Is it going to be the state? Is it city? What happens if you go beyond the city into urban or more rural? Is it the government? Or is it some form of super large technology company that sits across the globe? And how do we as society feel about surrendering that level of information into those type of actors? And what happens when a bad actor gets involved, which will be only a small percentage of people who've got bad intent? But how do we feel about the trust of these institutions yet to be defined, and how are they protecting themselves for bad actor intervention? And these are sort of things which really do impact us as society. If you just look in a similar way that was on the slide earlier about the way the society views autonomous vehicles of the future, and do they think it's safer? And then if you look a week after the incident in Tempe, Arizona, where the lady was unfortunately killed, there was a massive step change, as you would expect, because it's such new technology. But the expectation of that is it will be resolved, but we don't actually understand enough as societies to know how is it going to be resolved, because the technology is so new and because it is so fractured that we don't actually have the trust yet to think that it will be resolved fully. And it's taken a while for those large organizations to address the trust factor as a result of those types of incidents. So I think there's a huge link to be made at the moment around the technology solutions which we know are out there, the city solutions which we know will help us have better lives, basically reduce congestion, reduce traffic, reduce the amount of time it takes to get from A to B. But also, from a societal point of view, for us to be able to fully trust and embrace and adopt these types of technology for the future. And I think that's the interesting point from a Here East point of view, is having universities on site which will address some of these solutions, having large-scale globals on site like might have Ford and many others, having more startups like Alex and his team on site as well, satisfying some of these answers, bringing it all together in one site. Hopefully, from a Here East point of view, we'll then start to be able to message out into society at large.
Excellent, fantastic. So we have a lot of great questions. My question is, can we have additional 3 or 4 hours for the panel? Probably not. So I would like to continue from the point that we've discussed the incidents, the unfortunate incidents with the 737. And it was, I think, very interesting to see how the decision was made to stop flying them and who took the decision. And my question is, while in aviation there is a general notion that there is a responsible adults behind there who is taking decisions, and we know how much effort is being invested into crash investigation, for example, who is the responsible adults when we come to talk about the automobile industry? So who is the one who's going to say, yeah, we're going to stop using this, we're going to stop using that? Who is providing the license? There's one question here that says, if we are not going to have drivers, and drivers do have to go through some kind of a test before they are provided with a license, where the license is going to be, who is going to provide the license to whom? So, Gavin, would you like to be the first one?
This particular case provides you a really interesting case study, because you've got both. You've got nation states who are taking decisions, some positively to say no more flying over our airspace until you, as an operator and a manufacturer, are able to give us the assurances we need this is safe. Then you had other nations who were saying, you know what, it's fine, we've got loads of them, it's absolutely safe, not making that decision. And then ultimately, the manufacturer themselves said, no, stop.
Yeah,
now,
they
you
were
could
the last
be,
ones to say that.
They were, and you could be a cynic on this, and you could say, well, actually, they've done a quick cost-benefit analysis, say one more crash means that entire fleet is no longer sellable. Or they've done a safety evaluation and said, you know what, we have got a problem here, and we're going to do it that way.
So what is the lesson learned, Gavin, for the automotive industry that we can learn out of it?
I think the lesson is to take action straight away, provide message of reassurance, really understand what it is the cause, and be open and transparent. And I think as we, in the 21st century, the beginning of the 21st century, has had a massive push about transparency. And if there is an issue, in the days of the 60s and the 70s, automotive industries were very quick to cover up issues and just do the benefit analysis about, well, actually, 30 deaths to pay out and keep people quiet, or actually recall for millions of vehicles. We'll do the latter, we'll do the former. I think now society is not willing to accept that. And actually what they're willing to accept is a more transparent view to say, you know what, there is a problem, let's stop.
So there is a maturation process of society in that
Absolutely,
sense.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody else would like to address that?
Well, I think one thing that it highlights, and maybe similar in the future of mobility, so is that there's multiple actors involved. So as was mentioned, it was some of the states that said, for example, the UK said there's no flying over UK airspace. But you've also got the airline that has got a decision in it, and then Boeing as well that made a decision. And that's just going to be increased in the future of mobility, because at the moment, you know, if you think about, mentioned the Uber accident, of course, that was some of Uber's systems, but it was running on a Volvo, and actually the Volvo's internal system, because it wasn't deemed to be smooth enough ride, had been turned off, right? So you've got multiple actors there. You've got the Volvo and the Uber, but going forward, one can imagine that there'll be new services added, that if I've got a load of sensors in my vehicle, then I could see a market coming about where somebody says, we will do that autonomy for you and make a nice smooth ride or something like that. And that will be a small player in a big market. So I think at this stage, we need to be thinking that there may well be an accident, right? I think that's inevitable. But we need to be prepared. What do we do in that case? But what do we also do where it's just as in this case, it could affect, it's a system fault, which could affect a whole heap of things. And we should be preparing for that now, and the UK government should be taking a lead, and I'm sure Meridian will have a view on that.
Okay, yes, please, Alex.
So I think the one thing we haven't mentioned yet is the insurers, because the reality is a lot of the automotive industry is driven from the insurance perspective. The reality about Boeing telling people to ground the planes, it's probably because they were being told that maybe the certificate of airworthiness might be pulled, or the insurers would no longer essentially insure the plane to fly, or the airlines were going to ground them. So in a lot of cases, it probably was actually a damage limitation exercise for them to say, please don't fly our planes anymore, as opposed to suddenly have this wave and, you know, potentially killing the entire line, as you mentioned earlier. So I think that they're a big part of the kind of adults in the room in terms of automotive. The reality is it is a group effort. It's not just a single organization, and you do have to consider actually who holds the manufacturers to account. How do you ensure the manufacturers hold their suppliers to account as well? Because one of the things that we see, particularly in transport, is a huge supply chain, but actually a lot of the suppliers are promising a lot, but the reality is when you dig deep, they're not actually delivering it. They're not doing what they're saying they're doing. So I think more needs to be done in that area as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So we obviously have covered only the tip of the iceberg, and hopefully we have left you with some material to think about. I would like to thank the panel members. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you all for a very compelling conversation there. Lots more to talk about when we get to our coffee break, which is not very far away. So just before we do that, I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues to the stage. So in creating a program like this, we really need to think in two timeframes. So we're delighted to be funded by UK government via DCMS. And we have funding up to March 2021, when the UK cybersecurity strategy will be refreshed and renewed and hopefully enlivened again. But we need to think to that time frame and then much further afield. So I heard from both Ronnie and several other colleagues in the Industry Advisory Board about how long it takes to build an effective cybersecurity ecosystem. And some of the experiences we shared in Belfast with Queen's University, in Singapore with the National University of Singapore, and indeed with Cyberspark, tells us that we need to be thinking about 5, 10, and 20 years worth of progress here. So with that in mind, my colleague Saj Huck is charged with driving that sustainability strategy. He's our new program director. I'd like to introduce him to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to speak to you all today. So far this morning, we've heard quite a lot about the strategic context within which we're operating, and also the reason for why we're here. But I wanted to focus a little bit on the community that we're building here, and also specifically how we support our companies who are coming through our program. So since Lorca was launched in June 2018, we've supported 20 companies through our program to date. What we believe makes us unique is actually the bespoke nature of the support that we provide to each business. And we do that by working in partnership with Deloitte, utilising their commercial capabilities, Queen's University Belfast and their academic excellence, and also bring our own Plexal innovation capabilities to bear. And what we do, utilising those three partnerships, is effectively build a tailored package and a curriculum for each business based on their individual needs to support them on their scaling journey. Coupled with that, we also help them to scale within the UK through industry engagement, as Andrew has touched on, specifically through industry partnerships, through the likes of Lloyds Banking Group, the Global Cyber Alliance, and Dell Technologies as well. And then beyond that, we also help to launch them internationally into new markets. And that is very much in partnership with UK government. So, for example, the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport and the Department of International Trade. And how that takes the form is through participation, for example, in international trade delegations. And just last week, for example, we took out 9 of our cohort companies to San Francisco with that ambition too. So you're probably wondering, okay, so that sounds great, but what's the so what? What's the impact of that? What have we actually done today, and what have our businesses achieved? Well, since we launched in June 2018, collectively, our businesses have attracted around £20 million of investment already to date. They've landed major contracts with multinationals and government sector agencies. We've also seen one acquisition by a global cybersecurity company. And they've also, which is something which is really pleasing to us, is they've also started to form formal partnerships intra-cohort, so with each other. And the reason for that is so that they can further integrate their solutions together and optimize their solutions to meet the strategic needs of the market. And the reason why I say that latter point is really pleasing to us is because collaboration is ingrained in our psyche here, in our cultural mindset. And it's so pleasing to see that happening because as Robert Hannigan touched on earlier, and also Andrew will probably speak about later, what we don't want to do through the next 3 years is just proliferate a multitude of tools which are tactical solutions when really we need to be thinking strategically and therefore working together. So before I move on to the video where you can hear from some of our cohort members actually talking about their own experiences of Lorca in their own words, I just wanted to leave you with 2 particular asks. So number 1, please do take it upon yourselves today to network with our cohort companies, to introduce yourselves to them over lunch and visit them round the corner in the Innovation Hub where they're showcasing their technologies and so that you can see for yourselves the great things they're doing. And number 2, applications are currently open for our 3rd cohort who would join our program in June 2019. So if you yourself are interested in becoming part of our community or you know of somebody or some people who would be, please do connect with us. That's all I'm going to say today, but thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the agenda and have a great day. Cheers.
The UK and the world are looking at a number of very key enabling technologies: autonomous vehicles, machine learning, space technologies, quantum. With all of these come the burden of security. So right now, more than ever, the technology and innovation for cybersecurity is really, really important. It's something for us to focus on, both as a UK economy, but also globally.
We are living in this connected world, and security is absolutely paramount. It's a huge threat that we all face, not just in this country, but worldwide. And I think that we're part of that effort in order to secure our connectivity.
A program like this allows us to actually look at how we can come together to provide a more rounded solution to the customer.
For the last 6 months, we've been on this program. We've received great mentoring from the likes of Deloitte. We've received fantastic technical expertise from CZIT, and we've met a lot of industrial partners as well, which has opened up new doors and opportunities for us.
Without the Lorca support, we probably wouldn't have made that development that we've made with CZIT's engineering team. It's something that's actually turned out to be quite important for us and opened up new market opportunities.
It's giving me the opportunity to enhance the business and to hopefully go on to new things in the future a lot quicker.
It's a fantastic opportunity. You get great resources behind you, great support, you get so many opportunities. So for any business that's thinking of joining Lorca, absolutely make that application.
We have the power here as a cohort to look at how we integrate some of our capabilities, integrate some of our go-to-market strategies, so we can provide a rounded solution to the customer. And that is very powerful to the buyer.
Okay, guys, could you make your way back to the seats, please? So just while everyone is gathering back, really great energy in the room, so I'm really delighted everyone's getting the chance to network. Now, what I'd like to draw your attention to is the app that I've referenced earlier on. So far, 192 of you have downloaded it, which we're very grateful for. So for those of you who have downloaded it, if you get your phones out now and open up the app, there is a voting feature which we'd just like to try out with you. So at the bottom of the home page on the app, if you go into voting, we've just got 3 questions just to prompt a little bit of debate as we go. So the first question is your trust in the web-scale service providers trending up or down? Okay, and if we go to question number 2, and we'll review the outcomes in a second. So can privacy be maintained without an internet revolution? So many of you will have heard Tim Berners-Lee's discussions this week on the 30th anniversary of the internet. And then the third question. Could Brexit be an opportunity to create a framework for trust in the UK? So many of you laugh, but an opportunity for deregulation, regulation, whatever it may be, but could we use it as a positive moment? Okay, so if we could just review some of the answers, and we'll come back to these later just to see where the volumes sit. So 65% of you are feeling negative about the web sales service providers. Not unsurprising. If we could just have a look at the results of question number 2. So we agree with Tim Berners-Lee that we need a revolution on privacy, where data is stored, how it's accessed. And then question number 3. So the laughs in the room won. Great, so now we're all back from a great coffee break, great opportunity to network. I'd like to introduce our next panel. So the panel is called Me, Myself and AI. And the chair of the panel is a long-standing friend of Plexal, so a lady called Ghislaine Boddington, who's creative director at an organisation called Body Data Space, and also works at the University of Greenwich. So I'd like to welcome Ghislaine to the stage, who will also welcome her panel.
Great, thank you. Great, so very happy to be here. I'm Ghislaine, I'm from Body Data Space, a collective based in East London. And as you can tell, we work about the body data in virtual and physical space. And I'm going to start this panel with a very short, fast little few slides to get us all into a common place, then bring up my expert speakers to actually give them all 3 or 4 minutes to speak to us, then have some questions from the floor, some general questions from the apps, etc., and open it out, yeah. So this panel, right, forward, let's go. Me, myself, I. Here we are. Me, myself, I, and AI. Me, myself, and AI. How are we actually moving forward today in the relationship to discussion around the use of our personal data? Now, this panel is going to take this discussion right back into the personal. We're going to take it right into this body data space, this area where actually, with us at the center of a major set of data which we're transmitting out from our bodies in every way. And many of these transmissions are even held in your hands in your smartphones today. The living body at the center of the debate is where we need to move, the physical self and the data self, and how we actually deal with these. So in today's world, we know data is actually being extracted from us, from our biosignals, at a rapid rate. We know about our fingerprints and touch side, heartbeat, and actually breath, even breath, even irises. Irises, when we're in passports, breath is coming. These are all layers of encryption that we're starting to build up around our personal data. And we need to actually really look at this, a public understanding of this, and evolve rapidly the ethical discussion at the centre of this, which is what we need to do today. So, many of these you will know, sensors on the skin, our Fitbits and fitness bands, even microchips which have been internalised, proprioceptic motion and movement gear, these are all electronic jewellery. These are all passing, transmitting from the biosignals in our body out into the outside world to communicate or to receive back other data in different ways. And the future ahead holds these challenges in a very dynamic landscape to be understood by us all. Now, microchipping might seem a long way off, but in fact it's extending rapidly from the cyborg scenario here with Manel Munoz and his microchip at the back of his neck to feel the weather. In fact, the Swedish businessmen are chipping themselves now instead of their Oyster travel cards for their season train tickets. It's been done through the Swedish train firm. And equally, banking is exploring microchips at a rapid rate to actually give us access to our information. And facial recognition, we hear about a lot. Facial recognition all around us, but actually facial recognition which takes forward and actually starts to describe our behaviours, our moods, our emotions, as in the Chinese social experimentation going on. This is the future that we need to look at with its challenges. And so we need to really be careful about this discussion about our data selves, with the addition of AI, the representation of ourselves into avatars, into holograms, into telepresence robots. We are on a multi-self point, and we need to discuss our own agencies within this. So this is a deep collaboration, which is with our own bodies in the machine. And today, what we're interested in, bringing up the experts to talk with me, is can we create a scenario where we can securely tether our data cells to our physical selves in a way where we can win-win for all? And can we do that rapidly and ensure a protective environment, not just for ourselves, and this is a personal issue, but for our children and our grandchildren onwards? So I'm going to invite up to the stage now from 4 very different backgrounds, each to give us their expertise. We have research, we have think tank person, we have a startup person, and a political overviewer. So first of all, Dave Rowley, would you like to join me? Dave is the commercial director of Object Tech Group, actually one of the Lorca cohort based here, at Plexal. And he's going to, yes, that's great, thank you. Right, Chair, thanks, great. Now, Professor Mark Bryars, the Programme Director at the Alan Turing Institute and Professor of Cybersecurity and AI at Cranfield University. And thirdly, Katja Bego, who is a Senior Researcher and Data Scientist at Nesta, and Nesta is our UK Innovation Foundation, and exploring the positives and negatives of innovation for social good and for society. And last but not least, Dr. Charles Creel, I'm going to get you to say that again for me, Charles, from Creel Agency, and Charles is a specialist in this whole area actually, and an advisor to the DCMS select committees at the House of Commons. So as you can see, an excellent expert panel here in front of us. Thank you all for joining us, and actually I'm going to pass over to 3-4 minutes each from you to get your inputs from the different perspectives on this data cell side. So I'm going to start with Dave. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Hey everyone, thanks for having me today. So I work for Object Tech. So we are a part of the second cohort of Lorca, and we are, I suppose, addressing this erosion of trust that consumers and businesses are now having in our digital identities. So we've created a digital identity platform, a solution that is really focused around empowering the individual to take back control of their data. But actually the way that data is stored and managed is in a decentralized manner, so moving away from sort of the centralized and siloed ways that the data is stored, bless you, at the moment. And the focus of that is really then to enable individuals to have a single truth about who they are, and then in a world sort of post-GDPR and increased regulation, able to then permission organizations, third parties, to access information about themselves for a direct value exchange. So I think moving into that space. Now, our approach is very much focused around, as you can imagine, security and privacy by design. So absolutely focused on that in terms of our solution. Very much human-centric. We've already heard quite a lot today, and more broadly around the importance of actually, when it comes to cybersecurity, the human element is absolutely key, and there are a number of colleagues on the cohort 2 of Lorca that are addressing this core issue. The other area that we're very focused on in our approach is being sort of standards driven. So we recognize that actually being an individual startup with a smart tech solution is certainly not enough within this space. And actually what we want to be doing is bringing industry, government, big business, and educational facilities along with us in terms of standardizing a way of doing this and looking at identity in a sort of a, in a world with, that is absolutely focused around the security of the individual's data, but at the same time recognizing the needs of sort of the government bodies and business bodies as well to continue to function. So I suppose the benefits that we're really driving at is looking at improving customer experience in all walks of life, so that actually you are you, and imagine, I mean, in any given week, how many times that you have to sort of justify yourself to a third party, the sort of, whether it be passwords, secret names, fingerprints, whatever, but actually moving to this station where you are you and there's absolute confidence in that. So that not only improves your trust, but actually it also improves your customer experience. And I think then on the flip side, when you're looking at it from a provider's point of view, you're providing access to real, confident, verified data. And I think that verification piece is really important, because I think you can say that sort of trust without verification is actually faith. If you don't know, if an organization says, don't worry, I'm keeping your data and it's all absolutely fine, if they can't verify that you're just putting your faith in them. And I think that we're increasingly getting let down by putting that faith in people. So that's a really key part. But I think the benefit of the organizations is really understanding, well, what value is the information that you're holding on these people versus actually having permission or to access the information you need, which you have a guarantee that is true at that point in time, when you need it. Really, and you can see a real pivot in terms of actually sort of the legacy infrastructure that's required to maintain those systems versus then enabling those organizations to actually focus on the things they want to focus on and really enabling a whole new world of products and services.
Great. So just to clarify on on Object Tech, does that mean in the near future or now or even a bit longer run, I actually could come to you and say, Object Tech, you look after all my data, and you're going to look after it and make sure that actually that I can verify myself in, like you say, multiple ways across any 1 week, but I've got the trust in place? Is it a product service, or is it?
So I mean, our initial proposition is very much creating this platform on which we work with third parties, businesses, organizations to enable that. And like I say, I mean, what we don't want to be perceived is just one organization, you come and everyone put their trust in us and that sort of thing. That's why we're really driving this standardized approach. So we really want an international standard, and this year we'll be making some exciting announcements from an ISO perspective on actually a recognized way of how this should be done. And then we have put in place a team of sort of, I think, absolute experts that are in a very good position to deliver the best-in-class product within that.
Great. So Mark, moving on to you, I know that actually your work in the Alan Turing Institute as a researcher, yes, you're approaching some of these, like trying to look at standardizations, but in fact you're looking at the big data sets. So could you tell us about your work, please?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, good morning everybody, and thank you to the Lorca organisers for this opportunity to be here and present my 5-minute pitch to you all. So at the Alan Turing Institute, for those of you that don't know us, we're the National Institutes for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. And we were set up by the UK government in order to create value from data science and AI to UK PLC and UK society more generally. And what we do essentially 3 things. We undertake research, and I'll talk about some of that research in a moment. We provide training and develop training initiatives at the national level in order for everybody to understand data science and artificial intelligence. And we help to shape policy, either criticizing policy or advising policymakers in different ways. And
the reason that we do that is ultimately to create impact. And so what I wanted to do to start is just to illustrate the types of impacts that we are hoping to create with two illustrative examples of some of the two key areas that I'm partially responsible for at the Institute. So the first area is around online harms. So we're working with DCMS, helping to combat online harms. There'll be a white paper that's going to be released very shortly by DCMS where we contributed to that. We're doing some research in that space. I'll touch upon that in a moment. The second area is around modern slavery, working with an international group via the United Nations in trying to understand the prevalence of modern slavery and then counter modern slavery-related kind of criminality. And these are punctuated, these two examples are punctuated by some very powerful human stories, stories around people committing suicide, people being abused, children being exploited in ways that you otherwise wouldn't wish to imagine. And that really does motivate us as a research community to help solve some of those problems. But these problems are very complex, so it requires multidisciplinary teams from across the kind of academic spectrum, so social scientists all the way through to number theorists, in order to solve the different kinds of problems that exist within these two examples. And it's not just academia. We've heard several times today that we need to bring together academia, industry, and government in order to tackle these really big societal challenges. And the Turing Institute is uniquely placed as a kind of independent charity in order to convene and pull together the right community in order to solve these problems. So at the Institute, we structure ourselves, well, in many peculiar ways. I won't bore you with that detail, but one of the areas that we focus on at the moment is Safe and Ethical AI. It's a program that we have running, and I'll just describe 4 of the areas that we're touching upon in Safe and Ethical AI. And being from the north of England, I quite like receiving free things. So during these next 4 areas, I'm going to return back to the community and talk about some of the stuff that we've openly published and some of you may wish to benefit from and contribute to and criticize and do whatever you like, really. So the first area is around fairness. So to make a system safe and ethical, we need to understand the challenges around fairness. So this is essentially measuring and mitigating bias. So what's the freebie associated with this? Well, we've done some research which looks at counterfactual inference, which is a type of causal inference, for those of you that are familiar with these phrases. And what we've done is to embed this counterfactual fairness algorithm within the core TensorFlow library, which is a popular machine learning or AI kind of library. So if you want to understand whether bias exists in your data sets, then this counterfactual fairness algorithm exists in TensorFlow that you can download from Google's website or GitHub or wherever it's stored at the moment. Second area is around transparency. So how data and algorithms are used. That's my notes not being very well. So transparency, basically understanding algorithms, how they're functioning, how they're representing the data, and so on. And we've had a number of workshops on this particular topic, and there are many more workshops coming up in the future, which are available on our website if you'd like to attend and participate. The third area, which has also already been mentioned, is around privacy. So I don't really need to talk about privacy any further because we just had a kind of very interesting introduction to that. But what I would say in terms of what we've done, so we recently published a paper and some source code around trying to simulate data. So as the National Institute for Data Science, we want to ensure that data is readily available and being able to be exploited by everybody. But we care about the privacy of, say, the individuals that may be within the data sets. So one way to solve that problem is to build big walled gardens and just give access to data to people who are so-called trusted. An alternative is to generate synthetic data that has similar statistical properties to the source data, but is ultimately synthetic, so it has some kind of privacy-preserving properties. So in that case, generating data, some of you may know that generative adversarial networks, or GANs, are a particular way of simulating data. They have a problem that's known in machine learning as overfitting the data. So what tends to happen is when you simulate a data set, you'll find a couple of lines of data that are essentially the same lines that were in the source data. So that's not amazingly privacy preserving. So we've bolted on a slightly different technique known as differential privacy to this GAN technology in order to mathematically guarantee essentially the privacy of individuals within synthetically generated data sets. And like I said, there's software out there to do that. So I encourage you all to kind of generate synthetic data and share that data around. Finally, we're working in security. So that's conventional cybersecurity, and Carsten Maple mentioned some of the stuff that he's working on earlier on today as part of the Turing community and his work in Warwick. And also, we're looking at hacking machine learning algorithms, so adversarial machine learning, and we're tackling that with a Bayesian deep learning approach for those that are really interested, and we can chat over a lunch for those that want the technical detail around that. But again, the software and publications associated with that. So I think I've had my 5 minutes, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And actually, just to move on to Katja, who's actually been doing some fascinating research, I think is about to be published, but is going to talk to us about her knowledge and deep dive into deep fakes. Yeah.
Yes. So hello, everyone. My name is Katja Beeg, and I work at Nesta, where I lead our work on a future internet. It's mostly in the context of the sort of Next Generation Internet Initiative, which is a new European Commission sort of flagship program that's really about building a sort of more democratic, inclusive, and resilient internet, which I think will be very interesting for this room. Within that context, we're thinking a lot about sort of how you can make the internet more trustworthy. The reason why Europe, or the European Commission, wants to do this is really that we're currently with the internet kind of stuck. We've lost control because we're sort of stuck between these two narratives. On the one hand, you have the sort of American Silicon Valley model, sort of like surveillance capitalism we've heard a lot about recently, monopolized power in the hands of a couple companies. And the Chinese model, where the government's in charge. So this is really about building sort of alternative model where you kind of empower citizens and communities to sort of like shape the internet that they want to see. So to do that, I think we need quite a sort of ambitious vision for what the future could look like, but also think very concretely about what emerging technologies look like. The internet 2 years ago, 3 years ago is very different than the internet is today. It will be the same again a couple of years from now. So what does the future look like? And within that context, we're now thinking a lot about deepfake technology, which is one of those areas I think that's a bit at the nexus of data ownership, identity, trust. So quite relevant, I think, for today and for this discussion. So we have a report coming out on this soon, but basically giving you a little bit of an overview of our thinking there. So I think a lot of you probably have seen deepfakes. It's been in the media a lot over recent year or so. It's still very new technology. So deepfakes are basically sort of machine learning-based, AI-based new method of sort of training an algorithm to create a fake sort of synthetic version of anyone, really. So it trains on your pictures, on videos of you. So maybe some of you have seen the video of Obama, or more recently, there's this sort of new website out that has a lot of pictures of people, and they look like a real person, but they're actually completely AI generated, so that's a bit creepy to see. So sort of beyond that this technology is quite creepy, it also has some quite interesting properties, I think, that might make it a bit more important from a cybersecurity perspective. That's first that they're developing incredibly fast. So if you've seen the Obama deepfake, it's about 2-3 years old. It's created by the University of Washington in the US. That video is now already massively outdated. The technology, every couple of months, it gets more advanced. Second thing is that it's a very democratized technology as well. So it's very easy for anyone who wants to create a deepfake to make one. So basically, you really only need quite a basic computer, bit of tech skill, and you can do it. So, and the impact of this kind of deepfake technology maybe it can be potentially quite high, particularly if you're being bombarded by millions of these sort of fake versions of, I know, Ghislaine giving this panel, but he's not actually doing it because it's not Ghislaine, it's an AI version of Ghislaine hosting the panel. These sort of things, if they come at us in every direction, is quite a sort of reframe, I think, of how we've been thinking about trust so far. So quite quickly, I think two important implications of deepfakes are sort of on a, I guess for us on an individual level, so that opens up a whole arena of new sort of cybersecurity risks. So you can use, we've been thinking a lot about deepfakes being used on celebrities or on politicians, but on an individual level as well, if you can use your pictures to train maybe an algorithm to like fake you, maybe fake your voice. You know, we all know the sort of phishing calls that call us up, pretending to be, I don't know, a grandchild of a grandparent, you know, in a car accident, call you up. What if you can actually fake the voice of that grandchild, which becomes easier and easier to do? So this opens up a lot of new possibilities. They're quite scary. And a geopolitical stage, you also think, is quite large risks associated with deepfakes. So it can be used for political purposes quite well. What if you can create, say, a fake video of a world leader declaring war or some sort of announcing some sort of thing? And it will be quite easy probably to prove that they're not real, but in the current media ecosystem where a video like that can go viral within hours and millions of people have seen it, that's quite a scary thought. So it's a bit like, will the new sort of Europe's or the world's news Franz Ferdinand moment be a virtual deep fake one, you know? So to nuance a bit this discussion about deep fakes, I think they're getting good. They're not perfect yet. This is really a technology of the future that's now being developed. So a bit my takeaway point here would be is that this is why it's so important to think about futures and emerging technologies before they happen. So we can anticipate this now. We can develop solutions that can counter this. The Pentagon is doing a lot of this, other places as well, mostly in universities, to sort of help detect deep fakes. We also need to address sort of social issues here, but we have some time to do it. So it'll be interesting to think about how we can do that. No. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now is the time. We've got to do this now so we get ahead of ourselves. Really great point to put on the table, yes. So Charles, can you give us some comments in from the numerous different angles of your work across many years in this area?
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Charles Creel, and I'm the founder of Creel Agency. We're a stratcoms and research and policy organization that also happens to make film and television. Right now, I see that I'm advertised behind me as being with the UK House of Commons, so I'd just like to say I'm sorry, and let's move on from there. But one of the functions of the House of Commons is the DCMS Select Committee on Disinformation and Fake News, which I've been advising. So the next thing to say is probably something about Facebook. My shock about Facebook today is that the leading story has been that Facebook has been out for a few hours, not the story that Facebook is actually under criminal investigation, according to a New York Times story, which changes everything, and we certainly hope is an outgrowth of some of the work we've been doing. But we're not here to talk about Facebook. I'm going to talk about something else. On 31st of August in 1869 in Ireland, Mary Ward was riding as a passenger with relatives in an experimental steam car. And she was thrown out of the car and fell under the wheels and was the first person ever killed by an automobile. Even worse, on the 6th of August 1915, a 9-year-old, Douglas Spedden, who survived the Titanic, was fatally struck by an automobile at his family's winter home in Maine. So became the first child to ever be killed by an automobile. When we invent the car crash, and we invent the crash victim. So when we think about technologies and the developments of new technologies, we also need to think about what the accidents of those technologies might be. The self-driving car comes obviously after speaking about the car. We've already seen one person killed by a self-driving car. At some point, we're going to see a family in a minivan killed by a self-driving car, or an entire busload of children killed by a self-driving truck. Or how about blockchain? Well, I keep hearing that blockchain is going to be the answer to everything. And I have to admit, it's outside the parameters of my personal research, but if every node holds a copy of every piece of information, if I can ask y'all working in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, what could possibly go wrong there? Or what of Facebook, which, let's talk about the feed, which is a fantastic way to get lots and lots of information. But you know, when people think about the feed, the Facebook feed, they tend to think of it as it's a roll of toilet paper, and you just have to scroll through it, not realizing that it's actually a little bit more like a game that you're playing. And you open the app, and the first thing Facebook shows you is what it thinks will get you to spend more time on Facebook. And then you make a move. You either dwell, or you scroll, or you like. And then Facebook decides what its next move is going to be. And you decide what your move is going to be. And so you're kind of playing chess with artificial intelligence. Or Tinder. You know, when you open Tinder, I promise you the first 3 people that you look at are out of your league. You know? But it keeps you on, and it keeps you scrolling through. But what happens when we play chess with a computer? We lose. And this is another accident of technology. So when we invent the technology, we invent the accident of technology. But AI is a little bit different because we've all been reading stories, we've been watching films, indeed, we've seen plays about robots and bad robots and the bad actions of robots. So the idea of the accident of artificial intelligence was actually invented long before artificial intelligence was properly invented. So the question is this going to save us from the car crash of artificial intelligence? Will the crash be in the algorithm, or is the crash going to be in the humans that are behind it? So the truth is, many of Facebook's problems might actually be solved not by artificial intelligence, as Mark Zuckerberg has promised us. Artificial intelligence will fix it. How many years down the line, I don't know. But in fact, they might just be solved with more robust moderation. We've heard that there are 30,000 people now moderating against disinformation. But what we're also not hearing is those 30,000 are handling copyright violation, they're handling bullying online, and they're also handling spam and porn online. So it's just not quite enough. They're also handling the massacre in Rohingya. So it seems like perhaps what we need is just a few more people online to try to fix this. AI is not going to fix it. It might be the attitude of low-wage, high profits in Silicon Valley, but AI is as much the problem right now as it is the solution. It costs a lot, but human moderation, but compared to the value that is being lost from Facebook, or the number of advertisers who are going away, or now the number of lives lost, it's really quite cheap. There's one more kind of moderation that our tech needs, though, and that's the moderation of greed. It's the moderation of success at all costs, and the moderation of low wages and high profits. We need the moderation that comes with the civil society, that says we humans are vulnerable and we need to be aware of this, that we're vulnerable to technogarchs who would control our communications, who would control our currencies, and control our societies in the interest of what Chris Wiley is calling a kind of neo-colonialism. So we're all vulnerable to schizo-fascists, for example, to the internet research agencies that attack our systems, that troll our discourse, but also manipulate the most vulnerable among us in the most exposed places we can possibly be. We're vulnerable to ourselves. We're vulnerable to stupid AI, poorly educated AI, underfunded AI, and AI without checks, balances, or regulation. We're vulnerable to greedy CEOs, to overambitious CTOs, and politicians who are happy to see no problems at all when we ask them to just look the other way, because there are no problems at all. So the accidents of AI are already amongst us, and we need moderation and oversight because a lot of the problems really lie with us.
Thank you. That's great. That's a great overview. And I'm actually sitting here with some questions I want to ask you, a whole load of amazing questions coming in on the app, and possibly some questions from the floor. Could I see if there's a few questions from the floor, just so I can get a balance in this? Any hands going up from the floor? Okay, well, I'll come back, just in case there is, in a minute. But actually, just first of all, to put to all four of you, to take this, thank you for all your inputs, and really great, both from, there's absolute, starting to look at our personal data protection itself, the bigger research picture, thanks very much. Fascinating on the deepfakes, and actually what we've got to look at and deal with now, to deal with those future issues, and this overview on the vulnerability side, and how we've got to start to protect. But taking this right back to you four and your personal lives, actually, I very much believe that I would like to have a personal data dashboard, which I could choose through a tick box system or whatever, what I would like to, what I'm fine about going out into anonymous way, into tech for good or social good or for medicine research, etc., and other things that I might choose just to share with you for, or just to share with family, and some things that I might say, yes, I'll share this, but, give me some money. Instead of a loyalty card, a couple of quid here, a couple of quid there. So personal data dashboard would actually mean that I become the controller. Yeah, I become the data controller at the front end through the user settings, rather than this back-end control systems that are often in place today. So I just want to ask you, each of you personally, at this point in time, and this isn't, fixing, what would you choose of that? Would you choose to have more control and something which you did the ticks yourself, or would you be, and because we're seeing that, and this is coming up in a couple of questions, that it's inconvenient for us to have control, that the public don't want to do this, take this actual risk to all the time, I guess, the time, to do it. But starting maybe with Charles, what would you personally do?
Well, I would choose control, but I have questions about whether the control will actually work. I believe that all of everybody in this, all the data of everybody in this room is already for sale on the dark web, so it's already out there, and it's not like you're going to be able to claw that back. Maybe we can fix things for people in the future, but again, that data's out there.
Your new lovely baby, which I know you've got.
Well, and my new lovely baby, who I have a 10-week-old, so forgive me if I haven't slept much. But I'm very hesitant about any of her information going out online, and I'm trying to handle data protection for her as early as I possibly can, but it does feel like having a bucket and fighting against a tsuami. I will say, though, that I understand the point of convenience, and I do think that most people would give up their civil liberties for 10% off at Selfridges. So it seems very unlikely that they're going to want to protect their data as well.
Katja, what about you? And you're slightly younger generation, not like, say, me and Charles here, who have actually been out there a long time and have just gave it all away very fast, without really knowing what's happening in the 90s. So, yeah, so...
Well, I'm afraid I think most of my data is out there. But I would say I'm really in favor of personal data stores and these sort of ideas, but I think they're kind of a small solution in what needs to be a wider arsenal of solutions. So first of all, I think that the value in data is really only in sort of communal data, right? So we need to kind of treat data as a commons rather than as sort of each individual person's rights for it to have value. So if you think about the data that's out there on us, that's not even our data, like these questions of ownership are quite unclear, but it's sort of about us. So if I take a train and it sort of has my individual data point because it's collected by whatever TfL, is that interesting if we don't have data on many more people? So I think that's a limitation. Yeah. Second one is also a really weird example, but so say if I had a twin, I don't. If my twin does a DNA, like, I don't know, goes to 23andMe, gets her DNA profile made, that's the same DNA profile I have, that personal data is the same. It's a very specific example, but you can think of millions. That data is still out there, that's a part of me, sort of, still shared with the public. So I think where the boundaries lie of ownership and sort of that pooling issue make this sort of limited solution, but an interesting one.
Commons very important. And some tricks there, but be careful, basically, yes. So what about for you personally, Mark, outside of the very intensive big data overviews that you're doing in work?
So I think the premise of the question is quite interesting in the sense that there's a one-dimensional scale, and we can have a slider from kind of control of data to less control of data. And actually, as we all know, the reason that there isn't this slider that exists today is because it's much more nuanced than that. Yeah. And so if such a slider one-dimensional scale did exist, because I feel like I understand the technology reasonably well, I would have more control than less control. But actually, the more general point I would make is that I think it's on us all as a kind of cybersecurity technical community to actually educate the wider public in understanding the nuances behind this, what is actually a multi-dimensional scale rather than a one-dimensional scale. So I would plea everybody, kind of make a plea to everybody to educate your friends about this topic, such that we can all understand where we sit in this spectrum.
No, this is really important. We need to actually be talking in the pub about this. We need to be actually having lots of debates in schools, much more in schools about it as well. And actually, Dave, I mean, that's what you're aiming at with Object Tech, is to actually widen this debate. But personally, I'm sure what's your...
I think, no, but it is very nuanced, and I don't think, I think making everything focus around, and again, I think we should move away from this perception of an app that you open up and it's your personal dashboard. Me personally, it's about a value exchange, right? And I'm not going to just load a load of information into an app by a third party for no direct exchange at that point in time, and a multiplier of an exchange of value. And so I think that actually this is where we see, if you can create this ecosystem where there are specific use cases where having this information sharing point, rather than, so imagine a world where you never have to fill a form out again. You actually just authenticate yourself there, and then there are no forms. Essentially, it's just you are enabling that to happen. Right. And our first use, and I think with all this stuff you can talk about boiling the ocean a bit. So our first project is with a large new hub airport, and really battling their border control issues. And so actually say the number of people, so actually what we will enable is actually passing, securely storing and passing passport information to a border control, so that you can enable seamless, you can get rid of the gates and actually improve security but improve customer experience. So I think there's a danger in going too, thinking about it too broadly, and actually focusing on individual use cases is quite useful as well.
Can I just ask a question about individual use cases about this? Because what concerns me is we look at this as though companies are infinite. And you can have a company that you trust a great deal and you give all of your data to, but that company will shut down. I mean, forget that I worry about what's going to happen to my library, my Kindle library, when Amazon tanks, because one day it will. It'll tank one day. Facebook will tank one day. Or they'll be broken up and they'll be sold off. And what happens to those massive amounts of data?
And I think there's a couple of points that you're absolutely right. One is that is why I think the standardization and creating a standard is so important, so that you're not reliant on one organization, that actually your identity is yours. It's not, essentially, it's providing a toolkit for you to protect your information and take control, not if Object Tech doesn't exist, your identity doesn't exist. So actually that's why creating this framework with regulation and legal framework, as well as a technology solution, and bringing a critical mass together is so important.
And actually, all of you mentioned this, the base of this being that bringing more people together to discuss this of an interdisciplinary nature, but we need, Mark was very clear, academics, we need business people, we need everyone to come together. And you are working already in a kind of network pool. Would you like to, we've only got a couple of minutes, but maybe just 1 minute on... absolutely. Yeah. And I know that we're not unique in this, and I think the whole point of this forum here is bringing everyone together. So we're actually working with UCL and a number of sort of government bodies, businesses, other education facilities on really, we formed a working group around trust and anonymity in the digital economy. So really focusing on actually protecting sort of the individuals within a world where these emerging marketplaces are coming through, and actually really challenging some of these fundamentals around how data is used. So I would encourage anyone who is interested in getting involved to please come and either visit me or the Object Tech stand, and we can give you more information. But actually, Jeff Goodall from UCL is here today. Right.
So it's very much run by UCL. It's not an Object Tech initiative. So that's a very important point to make.
That can be a gathering place. I know that also Nesta has several events happening all the time around this. There's the Decode project and the Next Generation Internet project, and actually even in Milan this weekend, if anyone else is there, I'm doing an ESTA project which is looking at this area too. And Mark, of course, the Alan Turing Institute is there for us all to link into. As you said, there's reports and information to download. And I think you have a series of discussion and debates too, don't you, to this widening. Let's just get this out there for a much wider debate amongst everybody. Because one of the key issues about this is the myths, is the misunderstandings that are happening in a general public level. And it's complicated, it is really complicated, but actually this is about each of us individually, about our children, about our grandchildren, so that we have to find a way between us, all of the different specialists here, to ethically take on board that we've got to demystify this and enable a wider public to understand the issues at the base of it. So we've had some other fantastic questions here, but I can see we've only got 10 seconds left. But I want to mention so one of them at least that possibly could go forward in a day and be discussed at lunchtime. So from Bill Aronson from the Artificial Intelligence Research Group Limited. Should businesses be proactive in challenging abuse of trust by politicians? How can businesses maintain trust when politicians worldwide are promoting a post-truth world? So I thought that was important to bring that out. It's a very important day for this discussion. We know we're sitting here. And maybe that's a lunchtime debate to join. So thank you very much to all of you for putting absolute great expertise in from different angles. we could discuss this all day. Let's keep discussing it and run it through into the other panels that we've got here today too. Thanks ever so much, yeah.